Hello everyone, welcome to the Union Pacific Railroad Evanston subdivision in HO scale. My name is Daryl Cruz, owner and builder of the layout, and your host for a special instructional video on building Fast Tracks Turnouts. Have had a lot of comments and asking about the turnouts and how hard are they to install and so forth, and if they're cost effective. So I thought I would just do a tutorial. Actually, not a tutorial, just a demonstration of building the Fast Tracks Turnouts. Now, as you can see right there, this is a curved turnout with radius 50 and 35 inches. Now, there are some videos online at Fast Tracks website on how to build the turnouts, but I do things a little bit differently. First of all, I don't use their PC ties. I use Clover House PC ties. They're about half the price of what Fast Tracks charges. And it just kind of shows one of the first things you need to do is to get the PC ties cut out to fit each of the locations on the jig. Now this jig cost $145, which seems kind of expensive, but it is a precision milled aluminum jig. And I'm going to be building 7 turnouts with this, which if I would buy 7 curved turnouts like Pico, it'd be $40 a piece. It'd be about $280. So I actually save money buying this jig and then building them with the Fast Tracks jig. They're basically our handmade turnouts. Now, as you saw there, I usually try and cut these PC tie strips a little bit longer, exactly, or a little bit longer, and then if they're too long, I'll just use the file to kind of shorten them a little bit so that they fit nice and snugly, or nice and snug, I should say. So here you can see now the H is for hinged, the S is for straight. I use straight turnouts. I don't put the hinge in the points. So that one is blank. I put it in the S for straight. So after you have all the PC ties in place, then it's going to take some filing. And first thing you need to do is use this jig here for filing the stock rails. And I set it right there to kind of get an idea of where exactly this is going to take place. Now, if you notice, one thing I do in addition to Fast Tracks is I put a little notch in the end there. So the points are going to fit right into there. And I kind of notch it a little bit. And Fast Tracks doesn't say to do that, but I like to do it so that the points will kind of fit into the rail and you don't have any problems with rolling stock picking the points. Alright, now as you can see, I do have one stock rail already soldered to the PC ties. And then this is the second one. And one of the things you have to do with the curved turnouts is to get the rail to be kind of in the same curvature as the jig. So that once you have it soldered to the PC ties, it'll keep the curvature as accurately as possible. Now you need to do this with the diverging route on even the straight turnouts, but with the curved turnout you have to do it on pretty much all the rails. As you can see, it kind of took me a little bit to get this to be curved just right. This video is pretty long. It's about 45 minutes, I think. So you may want to fast forward through things or just kind of sit back and watch if you want to see the whole procedure. If you're like me, I kind of like to fast forward and go back and forth and see the parts that I like. Alright, once the stock rail is filed so that the points can fit into the stock rail on the inside, a little notch there for the end of the points. Got everything aligned correctly, then we'll go ahead and solder this. Now, it doesn't really have to be, the curvature doesn't have to be exact, perfectly exact, because the soldering to the PC ties kind of holds it in position, so it pretty much holds its curvature. But all right, before soldering, you do need to put a little bit of flux on there. This is electrical flux that's in a paste form, and I probably overdo it on both flux and solder. But my experience has been if I just put a smidge of solder in there, like it says in the Fast Tracks videos, they tend to break loose over time. So I like to put plenty of flux in there, and then also put a good deal of solder. You notice I did clean it up a little bit. So the PC ties are from Clover House, and as I said, they're about half the price as the PC ties on the Fast Tracks website. And then the rail is from Micro Engineering. This is code 70 rail. Now the jig is designed for code 83, but you can do code 70 in the code 83 jigs. You don't have to buy a separate jig for code 70. Now here I'm zooming in here a little bit. You can't see I'm holding it down with a file, and you put the solder on the tie first, and then you touch the rail so that the solder follows the heat and goes up into the rail like that. Pretty cinchy, actually. Doesn't take much time at all. Now, as I said, I probably glob on the solder more than they say on the Fast Tracks video, and probably more than somebody that's really into Proto 87. They probably don't want to have that much solder on. There's some people that are really into doing the tie plates and making sure everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be visually and so on. But I'm doing 100 turnouts. It'd be different if I was doing a smaller layout. But with this many, I'm not going to worry too much on all that very fine detail. I mainly, with 100 turnouts on a large layout, I mainly want to make sure that it's trouble-free. So I go ahead and put on a good deal of solder, probably more than what is absolutely necessary. All right, here we have all the PC ties soldered, and you can take the piece out, and as I said, it pretty well holds the curve just by being attached to the PC ties. You can put the turnout in and out of the jig without too much problems. Just have to make sure you put it down all the way. Alright, so we have both stock rails in place, and now it's time to do the point rails. I'm not real clear on exactly all the terminology. I'm pretty sure the stock rails are the end rails, and this definitely contains the points. I'm not sure if it's called the point rails or not. But they have another filing jig here that's used for doing the points and also the frog. And I highly recommend these jigs because filing the rails is probably my least favorite thing, and it's hard to get it exact if you don't have some kind of a jig. So this is definitely something I would highly recommend that you go ahead and get one of these filing jigs and just use a regular standard file. There are some people out there, I'm sure somebody will comment about how they hand lay tracks without any jig and without any filing jigs, so definitely kudos to them for doing that. But it takes me about an hour to do a turnout using the jig. I can't imagine how long it would take me with that. Now, if you notice, when I file, I usually move both my hands as I'm filing. All right, with rails filed, and go ahead and take them out. And one thing I do is I do a little extra filing once they're out of the jigs to make them as thin as possible. You don't want there to be any obstruction when they come up against the stock rails. And then I do just a little bit of filing on the other side just to take off a bit so that there's a nice sharp point. Again, that's not in the video for the Fast Tracks, but I usually do it anyway just to make sure that there's no picking of the points. Alright, now this is going to go right there, and so I need to again curve it a little bit and make sure it fits. Alright, once I get it in place then, exactly where it's supposed to be, then I take a little X-Acto knife, and they have a little notch there. That's where it needs to be bent. So you have to make a little mark there somehow. You might use a pin, felt pin of some sort, of fine felt pin. I just use a X-Acto knife to make a little mark there, and then you just cut it with the rail nips. Just cut the base of the rail, and then I usually just file where it's cut. And that basically allows you, I file the underneath of it too. So that just basically, if I have that little notch there, that allows you to go ahead and make the bend. And it's not much of a bend at all, especially if you have a number 8. If you have a smaller number, it's going to be more of a bend. Okay, then reposition it, make sure it looks good. I cut these rails a little bit longer than what they need to be when I cut them out ahead of time. And then I go ahead and use my file to kind of mark where it needs to be cut according to where the jig is. And then it's ready to go. And one thing you also need to do is, so the flanges go in there without picking the flange away there, you just file it a little bit there to keep it as a little bit of a sharpness to it. And again, put it into position. Make sure everything looks good. Put some flux on. And then go ahead and apply some solder. On the videos at the Fast Tracks website, they just tape the rails down instead of holding it with a file. I like using a file. It just seems to be less time consuming. And then I also like to make sure it's solid against the PC ties so that you have a good connection. And there is one more area there to solder. It's this PC tie right here. Alright, and it's all in place. Alright, we have both point rails in place. So we'll go ahead and take it out of the jig. Everything looks good so far. And the next thing we need to do is do the frog point. And they have two different ways to put the rails in here. One is a very sharp incline, that's for the point rails, and then you have one that's at the angle for number 8 in this case. Actually, this jig is designed for number 8. The aluminum jig is, of course, number 8 turnout, but then the jig that I'm using for filing is also designed for number 8 turnouts. And it allows you to file not only the point, but then also the frog. Again, after I file it with the jig, I usually do a little bit more. Make sure that there isn't any obstructions. I don't worry too much about getting it to a point. You can definitely do some more filing later on. But I want to make sure I get the base of the rails filed, because you won't be able to file that later. Hey, now normally you can use either point for right or left are going to be identical, but I just realized for the curved turnout, it pretty much has to be curved in the correct direction. So you just kind of set them up, get them lined up together, and then I usually try to push them in as far as I can. I like to get the points the frog points as far into the frog as possible. The further you have it, the less likely you're going to have any wheel drop into the frog. You're also going to have more chance of the flanges picking the frog, but you can always file it as you go, or after it's installed. You can always file it down and adjust the flangeways on the guardrails to make sure that it does not pick. I definitely always want to make sure that there's no wheel drop on, no wheel drop at all on my turnouts. Now, if you're really paying attention, I actually have this in the wrong side of the jig. But that just means that meant that I had to kind of bend the rails the other way once I got it installed. So it all worked out. On a regular turnout, these rails for the frog are straight. But there is a little bit of curvature on these. Alright, once you have it soldered, of course you need to go ahead and file it down. On the top of the rails, I want to file it so that all the solder is gone and you can see the top of the rails. Alright, here we're ready to put the point in there. You notice I'm kind of bending it back the way it's supposed to be. Now I realize my mistake and had to bend it the correct way, just a little bit. This is really not much of a bend at all, but definitely is some bend, so I'm trying to get it to match up to the jig as much as possible. Alright, now I just make sure that it gets into the jig properly. And then again, I try to push it up into the frog as far as possible. See, you can see me pushing it in. Don't want to get it too far because you're going to end up having to do a lot of filing. Alright, once you get it to where you want it to be, apply some flux. I just want to make sure the rail is sitting flat on the PC tie. And then we go ahead and apply the solder. We'll go ahead and get the other side real quick. Alright, then to make sure that the point stays in with the frog and there isn't any movement, we turn it over to its underside and solder the point to the point rails. Alright, now it's time to do the guardrails. I don't have it on this video, but there is a little bit of a jig there. If you look at the very lower left-hand corner of the jig, there's a marking there to know how long to make the flange away, and then another one to make the bend on the end of the flangeways. Now this is something that later on I might, if the wheels are picking the point, even after I file it down, I might make some adjustments. Here you can see me putting the guardrail in the little jig there. That one was too short. I guess I do have it on the video. So you put it in there so you get the right length. And then you use the other one It's the shorter one to kind of make a bend. And then it's ready to go to be soldered as the guardrail. Got a piece of solder in there. Alright, last thing to do is soldering the points to the throw bar. So I'll get the throw bar into position. And then I hold the point up against the stock rail and onto the PC tie. Now you would think that by doing it this way, I'm going to solder everything together. But the solder very rarely goes under the PC tie. Now it has happened on very rare occasions, but for the most part it just stays between the point and the PC ties. It does not go under the PC tie, or under the rail I should say, and make any connection with the stock rail. Okay, see it's definitely can be moved. Then for the second one, you have to kind of lift it up a little bit. But for the spacing, I usually use a PC tie and just stick it in there like that. And that way, every single turnout that I will work on will have exactly the same spacing, and it's enough to make sure it's good operation, but not so much that it looks toy-like. All right. And we're done. It's amazing how precise you can get with the jig. So everything looks good. It's ready to be put on the layout. Before I put it on the layout, one thing I do is put the ties down. I glue them onto the templates. You can print out templates from the Fast Tracks website. And I print out the templates and I glue wood ties to them. And I don't use the wood ties from Fast Tracks. Again, you can get them cheaper from a place called Proto 87. And that they're a little bit cheaper, not quite as much of a difference as the PC ties, but they are, I think they're 20 bucks for 500 instead of 25 bucks. Definitely cheaper than the Fast Sticks or something like that. I forget what they're called when they put them all together. But anyway, here we have them all together. everything operates very smoothly. Usually takes a little bit of filing here and there, but still have to do turnout motors and wiring and everything else, ballasting at some point in painting. But it's a good start. Thanks for watching. Hope it helps if you ever try and do fast tracks. Take care, everybody.